Hello, one and all. Welcome to the latest Paddock Pass podcast. It's been a weekend off, but it's time to preview the Japanese Grand Prix and the first of 4 flyaway events in the 2025 MotoGP calendar. On this podcast, we've got a special interview with Michele Masini, the Gresini factory. I was going to say Gresini factory. I'm getting ahead of ourselves now. The Gresini team manager, conducted by Dave. So that's coming up. We're also going to talk about some of our favorite Japanese riders, Japanese GP memories, as well as give our predictions as always, and a couple of other talking points still to float to the surface. I'm Adam Wheeler, and on this call today, as usual, in the flesh, Neil Morrison. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Relieved not to be going to Japan actually this weekend, I have to say, because I think I might actually physically die if I was going to be flying this week. But thankfully, I'll be covering it from home, so a chance to rest and recover. The effects of Misano are still evident.
Dave, are you fearing death by traveling, or will you be at home also?
Either way, it would be a deeply miserable experience, so that's fine. I'm just sort of, it'd be nice to get the championship out of the way so we can start to enjoy the rest of the season.
Yes, that's obviously the main talking point coming into the Japanese GP, and the huge points advantage that Marc Marquez has to finally close this narrative of one of the best sporting comebacks of all time, in fact. So, but listen, before we get too far into the podcast, let's just start off the theme of this recording by nominating our favorite Japanese riders, because there's a few eccentric choices. Neil, you could argue that the Japanese heyday for elite level riders was kind of in the era you pride yourself on and having some extensive knowledge. Who's your kind of pick for this one?
Well, it's an interesting question, Ed. When you suggested we talk about it earlier, there's quite a few names that spring to mind. Noriyuki Haga was one of them, but he's more, I think if this was a World Superbike pod, then I would definitely plump for Haga. His sort of contributions to Grand Prix racing were few and far between, unfortunately.
So why would you want to say Haga, just out of interest?
Just because he was a nutter. And
because it's Nori Haga, that's why.
Yeah, exactly.
What more? Goodness me! Because Peter Bond worked with him, and basically Haga's feedback was he'd come in, throw the bike at the crew chief and say, "Bike shit, Haga good," and that would be the entirety of your of his feedback. So yeah, sorry, Peter, for stealing your anecdote.
Yeah,
carry on, Neil. Carry on.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Haga as a World Superbike entrant, but for Grand Prix, I'd probably go with Tetsuya Harada, 1993 250cc World Champion. Probably one of them. You can almost say underrated 250 riders. I don't think he got the kind of achievements that his talents quite deserved. He came into the championship in 93, won the series as a rookie. He won his first race as a full-time rider on a Yamaha 250 as well, which wasn't necessarily like the in vogue machine at the time. And we all know that he should have won the 1998 World Championship as well, but was nerfed off.
He did win it, but it's just that he had it stolen by
it's just
by a certain FIM safety officer.
It's just the history books don't say that he won it. So we're going to call him a two-time 250cc world champion. But aside from that, it was just probably one of the most special riders to watch on the 250s bike. And his kind of riding style was completely in harmony with the bike. And then when he stepped up into the 500cc class with Aprilia and rode their 500cc twin, he had some of their best ever results. I think he got their first Premier Class podium in 1999, scored 2 podiums that year. And it was just like on his day was just one of those guys that when everything clicked, a bit like Biaggi in 500s, when everything clicked, there was just nothing that could stop him. So he was something of an enigma. There were seasons when it just did not work. And I think he rode for Wayne Rainey in the 250 class in 96. And Rainey was just completely baffled by the fact that there was a rider here who had so much talent, as much talent as he had, but just didn't have the kind of application or dedication that Rainey would have showed in the 500cc days. But the fact that he was slightly flawed added to his mystique. So yeah, Harada was always a favorite of mine, and I still think one of the more underrated riders from the 90s that there was.
Neil, two questions. I mean, firstly, explain the Caparossi Harada incident, because there's some fans new to MotoGP who are probably wondering what on earth you're talking about, and the delicious irony of the head of sort of the FIM. Is it stewards panel or safety? What is
No, he's
Caparossi?
FIA. I think he's safety officer. So technically, he has nothing to do with people nerfing other riders off. It just whether it's whether if you were to nerf another rider off, the other rider will hit a barrier or not.
So yeah, right, okay. So just explain that, Neil, and also just give me your viewpoint, because I mean, Harada was on the most delicious motorcycle of the 250 class at the time. I mean, you needed to be on that motorcycle to win and to win titles. So did that have a factor also in Harada's kind of success?
Yeah, I mean, there was no doubt he was on the best bike that year in '98. We're talking about the final race of the season came down between Harada and Loris Capirossi in Argentina, track just outside Buenos Aires, and yeah. Rossi was going to win the race, and I think it basically boiled down to who would finish first between Harada and Capirossi would win the championship. And Harada really should have had the championship wrapped up. I think in the previous race, his engine seized when he was in the fight for victory. So you could say that he was slightly unfortunate to even be in this kind of title fight situation. And on the last lap, they came down to, I think, the penultimate corner, pretty heavy braking zone. And Harada was ahead, comfortably ahead as well. And Capirossi just shamelessly sort of let his brakes off and didn't even make the corner himself, ran off the track, nerfed Harada off. They were teammates at the time, it's worth saying as well. They were in this kind of a pretty super team with Rossi, which was just dominating everything. I think they won every single race in the 250s that year. Yeah, it was quite shameless. And then Capirossi went on to get sacked by Aprilia afterwards. There was complete disarray within the garage. You thought 2015 was bad. Check out Aprilia in 1998 to see a complete implosion after two riders getting each other's way.
In which case, Dave, who's your sort of favourite Japanese Grand Prix racer?
Well, the thing is, the Japanese were successful mostly in the period when I was less interested in GPs. I loved watching Shinya Nakano, but I think my favourite has to be Yoichi Ui, the 125cc racer. Because, well, for a number of reasons, the most important is because his name Yoichi, Ui is the sound you make in Dutch when something bad happens, and Yoichi Ui had this amazing knack of getting out, leading a race, and then crashing with about 2 laps to go out of the lead, and then finishing nowhere. So his name was synonymous with sort of his. There's a word for this where your name is what you do, and that was very much what Yoichi Ui did. But
nominative determinism.
Nominative determinism, yeah, exactly. But you couldn't help root for him because he was really good. He was really, really talented, and he always managed to sort of like get out in front of everyone, and he always seemed to manage to throw it away. I think there was one race a 125 race in Assen that I can't even remember the year. It would have been sort of late 90s that I remember thinking it was both hilarious and really, really sad at the same time. So yeah, he's definitely my favorite. I mean, like, Harada was fantastic to watch. Kato was a joy to watch. Like I say, Nakano was fun as well. 250s and GPs, but my favourite is absolutely Yoichi Ui for that reason.
My favourite, I'm going to say Norifumi Abe. Unfortunately, of course, passed away a couple of years ago, 32 years old. I mean, that's no age whatsoever. But famous, of course, for bursting on the scene in the early 90s or mid-90s, 1994 or 5, as like a wild card at Suzuka. I remember at the time, because we were kind of just lapping into the sort of the Mick Doohan era, and to have this Japanese rider out of nowhere suddenly leading the Grand Prix and riding in that really, really bizarre style. I mean,
beautiful.
Beautiful? I'm not sure I'd agree with that.
Absolutely. But it was really, really gracious and completely wild, and it was stupid, and it shouldn't have worked.
It looked a little bit like Goon style. I mean, it worked. I mean, he was sliding the 500 around like crazy, and of course inspired a certain Valentino Rossi. But I mean, if people listening or watching this podcast want to have a look, just sort of Google Noric, as he was called, Abe. You'll find pictures on Google, and you kind of think, well, how on earth is he riding the motorcycle like that? He seemed to be incredibly hunched over the front end, body leaning in the opposite direction that he should go. It was kind of inexplicable, but it somehow seemed to work. He became the first Japanese rider to win his home GP, I believe, when he sort of returned to Suzuka and actually claimed it. I'm pretty sure that was 95. So 96. Okay, thank you, Neil. And of course, just like another sort of king of the two strokes. And, as we kind of mentioned a few names, Japanese riders really excelling in the smaller cylinder categories. Abe was one of those that just sort of laid it all out on the line, made a GP career. And I don't know, I remember also my first year working in the championship, he was still riding MotoGP in the 500s. And I remember trying to grab an interview with him at the circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya. And I went over and introduced myself, and I was rabbiting away about how I'd like to grab sort of 10, 15 minutes of his time to do an interview for MotoGP.com. And I'd like to talk about his preseason build-up and how his training's been going, and, how he's getting on with the team. And he kind of looked at me, paused, huge pause, where I thought, what's going on here? And he said, would you mind repeating that more slowly, please? And I was staggered, because I thought that was such a polite way of saying I didn't understand a fucking word you said. But just a very charming, quiet guy. And of course, a little bit sort of his demeanor was the opposite to how he was on the bike, where he had his hair flapping out the back of his helmet, and of course was just riding around like both wheels are not really in line or in sync at any one time. So Abe gets my nomination for that. And like I said, it was just a shame to sort of lose him in a road traffic accident. Can I just give an honorable mention to Nobi Ueda as well? Another rider who excelled in the 125cc class, 14 wins. Just didn't look like a GP star at all. He had like these glasses on, so he looked like sort of some sort of scientist or a mathematics teacher at sort of secondary school. I met him at an MXGP Grand Prix in the mid-90s at Sugo, and just the most loveliest, unassuming man, and one of the very few riders that I actually asked to have a photograph taken with, because I just used to love watching him race on the 125s, and he was such a lovely bloke. So yes, Nori and Nobby. There you go. My two nominations for Japanese riders. There we go.
Abe always had his long hair flowing out of the back of his helmet, and that debut that you spoke about in 1994, he was riding his team was called the Mr. Donut Honda team, which also gave him added cool points, and I think was another thing that caught Rossi's eye. So yeah, and I think he worked with Mike Webb. Mike Webb, the current race director, was formerly a crew chief in the 500cc class. I think, I'm not sure exactly which team it was. Was it the official Yamaha team, or it might have been with Kenny Roberts? But Mike always said that Abe was comfortably the most talented rider that he ever worked with. He was just so gifted, but yeah, could turn it on. And when he won his race, I think he won 3 races. They were all absolute classics, but yeah, just couldn't do it on a consistent basis.
I remember seeing. I remember a story, and I can't remember where it was. Where someone was talking about riding, and they were trying to ride a bit like Abe, and the instructor basically said, "Look, the only person who can ride like Abe is Abe. If you're as good as Abe, you can ride like Abe. Otherwise, you hang off like the rest of us mortals." So yeah, that was what was so sort of exceptional about him.
Neil, do you reckon he was also one of the first Japanese to come over to Spain and really tries to submerge himself in the sort of Spanish base of training and living, that kind of approach to MotoGP, which, since through sort of the Asia Talent Cup and Honda Asia scheme, we've seen riders like, sort of Ayagura, for example, sort of submerge himself into, and sort of Ayumu Sasaki as well.
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah. I mean, now it's just like a normal thing, isn't it? That you come over and you live in Spain, you train here, you base yourself here during the year, and you do it from a very young age. So you kind of get the shock factor out of the way earlier in your career. But yeah, Abe moved over to Spain. I think it was at Kenny Roberts Senior's behest, because he signed up to his team in '95, and yeah, I guess you could say he was a bit of a forerunner in that respect.
On the Paddock Pass podcast, we're backed by rental.com. If you have a street bike and you're after an accessory such as handlebars, grips, chain wheels, then head to rental.com. There's a Fit My Bike tool, so you'll be able to find exactly what you need for the bike that you have in the garage. So just go to rental.com, have a look around, have a browse, and you'll be able to get exactly the part that you need for your bike. Thanks to those guys. Moving on. Dave, the last time we did a podcast, it was a Paddock Note show at the Misano test. And the day after, the circuit in Misano was kind of locked out to media because they had a test for Pirelli, the tyre manufacturer, incoming to MotoGP. Is there anything we kind of found out from that test, even though we were not allowed inside the circuit gates?
No, not really. Apart from, they said they did a sprint race, a sprint race simulation. It was just five. It was just 5 test riders. There was obviously loads and loads of Michelin rubber down at the time because, not only had there been a race, but also on the Monday there was the MotoGP test for the sort of contracted riders. But yeah, they were riding without ride height devices with reduced aero. There was an interesting. I didn't manage to get a photo of it, but there are photos floating around of Michele on a very revised aerodynamics package. Which my working theory is it looks like the kind of thing that you would use if you want to simulate the reduced aerodynamics which are allowed from 2027. It looked like it basically like a cut down version of the current aero, and from the photos I've seen, I think it would be illegal to use because it's not a closed. The top wings are not a closed loop. They're a single wing with end plates, which is not allowed. So yeah, it was. What we learned is that there's still a lot of work to do. We don't know any. I haven't seen any lap times. I don't think anybody knows any lap times. But basically, this really was the first time they actually got on. They actually got these bikes on track with the tires. The 2027 bikes don't exist yet. There's a manufacturer's sort of moratorium on actually putting the bikes on track until 2026 as a way of, because otherwise they're all going to be driving each other into spending more and more money, just as a way of capping costs. So yeah, we didn't learn a great deal apart from the fact that Pirelli thought it was great. So yeah. But,
which they probably would do anyway.
Exactly. There's going to be another test after Valencia. Again, it'll be closed. Again, one of the reasons there's no photos is because as a Pirelli person put it, out of respect for Michelin. Michelin are still the official single tire supplier and massive sponsors of the series. So you can't have pictures with massive sort of Pirelli logos splashed all over the bikes. It rather ruins the point of spending so much money to go racing for Michelin.
If you want an in-depth kind of discovery of what we learned at the test, then head to our Patreon channel, patreon.com/paddockpasspodcast. Dave and I sort of listened to the rider debriefs and we picked out some of the main editorial points from that one-day outing. Just to quickly summarize for other people, and Neil, I'm not sure if you listened to the show, but Dave as well, I guess the main things were Fabio Quartararo was not quite enamored with the V4 as of yet. Pecco Bagnaia making some more progress in terms of his setup. Maybe some timely gains before going to Motegi, the hardest braking circuit on the calendar. I guess that was pretty much it, right?
Yeah, the Yamaha V4 was obviously the big kind of story. The fact that Quartararo and Miller were able to get another taste of it after sampling it in Barcelona the previous week, and just the kind of wildly contrasting responses to Quartararo and then Miller and Rins. And I guess you could understand that. Quartararo is expecting this bike to essentially allow him to win in MotoGP, or at least get a good bit closer to winning than he is currently. And yeah, lots of comments that he mentioned were curt and direct, and not really suggesting that he was entirely content and pleased with what he experienced. The standout quote was, "I don't want to talk about the potential of this bike," when he was asked, can you see that this could maybe be something that would be very good in the future? Whereas Miller and Rins, I think, are more realistic, more pragmatic, and maybe less in a rush, more understanding that this is something that's going to take some time. I think Jack was saying that for where this bike is in its life, it's quite positive. There are definitely lots of improvements to make. The electronics, he said, need massive work. But for where this project is, I think it's not so bad. So yeah, seeing those contrasting emotions were certainly the things that stood out to me.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, Fabio Quartararo wants to win now, and the bike is nowhere near winning now. It's not going to be competitive. One of the more interesting comments which Jack Miller said was they have to figure out basically the way that the bike pitches. So because of the different engine layout, you've got a different center of mass. The way that the mass moves under braking and under acceleration is completely different to an inline four, because sort of the center of mass, you might have the center of mass in the same place, but as soon as you move the bike, tilt it or something, then the center of mass moves in a different way than it would with an inline four, because you've got basically two cylinders sticking out like that, rather than one bank of four cylinders sitting forward. That is just data. It's just experience. It's just all the rest of it. So yeah, they do have a lot of work to do. I think Yamaha did rush bringing this because they need to convince Fabio Quartararo to stay, because without Fabio Quartararo, they are in very deep trouble, I think. And Quartararo is quite clearly starting to lose his patience. I don't think it wasn't enough to convince him. But I mean, if you think about what Rins and Miller were saying, obviously the incentives for Rins and Miller to be positive about the bike are much greater, because Yamaha are not going to go out of their way to keep those two for 2027. But even then, they were much more realistic about where the bike is. It's still at the beginning of the project. There's a lot to do, and it does have potential. Where Fabio just says, "How am I going to win on this?" Well, you're not going to win on that. You're going to win on something which has got another 9 months or year of development.
Yeah, you have to imagine Yamaha will be throwing lots of expensive sushi at Fabio this week. Trying to make that 12 million per annum he's earning feel a little bit sweeter if he's on a bike that can actually empower him to do the job in MotoGP. But we kind of thought we'd see the V4 on track at Motegi Day. I mean, is there any reason to suspect that there'll be something sort of special going on for Yamaha at the Japanese GP? And I mean, is there any indication, any rumors that we've seen online that they'll be running the bike again before the end of the season for sure?
Well, we know that Augusto Fernandez said that he's got 2 more wildcards on the V4 lined up, which is, I think, Sepang and Valencia. Or was it Portimao and Valencia? I can't remember.
Sepang.
No, it was, Sepang and Valencia. So, the reason that Valencia is because basically it's ahead of the test again, is to gather more data to help with the test. The Valencia test is going to be absolutely crucial for the V4 project, and for Fabio Quartararo as well, I think. That is, that points the way for the kind of bike that is going to turn up at the Sepang test, and the Sepang test is going to be absolutely determinative of what kind of a season Yamaha have in 2026.
Just based on his form at the Japanese GP in 2024, KTM, of course, had Danny Pedrosa running laps in Misano. And just to close the testing subject from Italy, or San Marino rather, can we expect anything more from KTM, Dave? I'm trying to rack my memory and brain as to what sort of Pedro and the likes of Brad Binder were saying at the test. KTM are still developing. There's still moving parts around the motorcycle. Acosta was fantastic in Motegi in 2024. We should perhaps expect that KTM can be competitive again, particularly in sort of adverse weather conditions, which tends to happen at Motegi, and if the grip is not sort of as good as it was in Misano.
Yeah, I mean, what Acosta was working on was basically setting up this new aero that they have, which helps the bike turn. I think both Binder and Acosta were talking about they were working on stuff for the last part of the season. I think it is going to be useful for Acosta. And I think Acosta, there's a good shout for Motegi because this new aero that helps the bike turn does actually make it's a step forward where KTM really needed it, in the long, fast corners. And there's a couple of those corners at Motegi where it'll definitely help. The most interesting thing was they were definitely working on the mass damper again, because I could see inside of Enea Bastianini, they had Enea Bastianini doing that work. They had he was working on the mass damper, getting that tuned in. That is just a question of laps and laps and doing data. We also saw the little cylindrical mass damper on the rear of the swing arm of KTM, which we've seen on the Ducati this year. Again, if you want to reduce the vibration from the rear tire, then the closer you can get it to the rear tire, the better. There's also the smaller that the smaller weight, the smaller the amount of weight you need to add, because you've got sort of less intervening, less material getting in the way of that vibration. So, and it was interesting. It was very much, the test was very much a mixture of working towards for the rest of the season. Most of it was working for the rest of the season. And Marc Marquez was saying, he had a swing arm to test and a few others. And he was basically saying, what I'm doing is preparing the Valencia test. And at the Valencia test, then we'll see the 2026 bike.
Marc Marquez, of course, he's going to be the headline grabber this weekend in Japan, whether he seals the deal or the championship rolls on to the next Grand Prix. There's been some, what's the right word, outrage, perhaps, on social media this week. And MotoGP made like an official post on their Twitter saying, could it be a 7th MotoGP title for Marc Marquez this weekend? And the comments underneath are all about try 9. This kind of division between, is Marquez a potential 9-time world champion or a 7-time world champion, defined by his Premier class honours and victories, is something that seems to have stoked the fan base somewhat. And to be fair to the post by MotoGP, they were asking, will it be a 7th MotoGP title?
Exactly, yeah.
And there has to be some sort of clarification between MotoGP as a definition of the series and MotoGP as a definition of the class. And in that case, I think the social media post was very specific about the class. I mean, Marc will win 7 titles in the MotoGP Premier category. But then everybody seems to be getting their knickers in a twist about how many titles he's actually won. I just wondered if you guys had any similar thoughts or emotions or rage this week.
Yeah, I think there was a news story in El Periódico by Emilio Perez de Rosas, who has very close connections to the Marquez family, that was saying that I think the initial plans for Marquez was to have some kind of 9 in the celebration, because this will be his 9th world championship, and his previous title celebrations have included the number of world titles that he's won. I think it was level up for number 7, and then 8 in Thailand in 2019 was the 8 ball, I seem to recall. And I think there was a bit of pushback on this, because Dorna want this to be 7, to indicate the number of MotoGP titles that he's won, which I think maybe is viewed as symptomatic of the kind of way the sport is going, and has been going over the last 12 months, you could say. I think an increasing number of Moto2 and Moto3 teams are feeling that they are being perhaps squeezed out ever so slightly, receiving less and less coverage from
less pit lane space.
Less pit lane space, yeah. I think quite a few of them were told in Misano that they will not be allowed to use the garages in pit lanes from 2026. They'll be operating out of the kind of makeshift tents that some of the smaller teams in Moto2 and Moto3 have to use during a race weekend. I mean, there was also a lot of question marks, I think, among the Moto2 and Moto3 grid around the summer break time as to whether they would actually be appearing in all 22 race weekends next year. There are, I wouldn't say fears, but certainly suspicions that their presence will be cut down. Maybe the Moto2 and Moto3 championship will appear at, let's say, 6 or 7 less races from sometime in the future. But we did hear, I think, back in Hungary, that they had a meeting with the Moto2 and Moto3 teams had a meeting with IRTA, with Dorna, and basically they were told that things are going to stay the same for the next 2 years up until 2027, and then after 2027 during 2027 there'll maybe be a decision, okay, well, we might cut down the number of races for Moto2 and Moto3. However, that's kind of speculation. But yeah, I think the general feeling within the smaller categories is that with Liberty coming in, it is going to be all about MotoGP, and the smaller classes will be sidetracked somewhat. But yeah, I guess the whole Marquez 7th world title feeds into that narrative somewhat.
Yeah, I definitely think the Marquez 7th world title thing was the spark that really sort of set it off. This has been going for a long time, and it's not really anything to do with Liberty. This has been going for some time. If you look back for the past 2 or 3 years, you see less and less coverage on fewer and fewer social media posts, for example, from Dorna about Moto2 and Moto3. I think, I mean, if I was Marc Marquez, I would be celebrating, saying I'm on cloud 7 or something like that, to make it clear that actually is his 9th title. From what I was understanding from the El Periodico story, he'll basically just be celebrating number 1. I did write a big piece about this on motomatters.com, which you can find. I do think that downplaying Moto2 and Moto3, for a start, they have, that's where, the new riders are coming through. If you think of Pedro Acosta has been, perfectly fine in MotoGP so far, but he hasn't set the world alight. You can't really understand how good Pedro Acosta is without going back and thinking about his first ever, Moto3 race where he starts from pit lane and wins it.
Second.
I beg your pardon. Second, yes. No, well, that changes the story completely then. That's terrible.
It was in the same country, Dave.
Your facts right.
Same country, same track. So you're
exactly.
You're
no, but I mean, like, the point is he absolutely tore up Moto3. He had an interesting story in Moto2. He wins the title in Moto2, and then he comes to MotoGP. And in MotoGP, he just hasn't been the same rider, or he hasn't made the same impact, in part because of the factories he's with. You can't think of Marquez's incredible story without thinking about Estoril in 2010, without thinking about how he nearly won the championship in his first year in 2011 if it hadn't been for that crash where he nearly ended his career because he had double vision from the crash in Sepang during practice. Those races, the races in Moto2, the idiocy at Phillip Island where he was sent out to do a fast lap even though the session had been flagged, and then he slammed into
Willerot.
That's right. Ratapak Willerot. Yeah, exactly. Which again, outrageous, but it's all part of his story. You can't tell all of that story. I do understand the the desire to focus on Moto2 and on MotoGP. It is, after all, the premier class. It's the main story, but you need the backstory. Like sports journalism, sports is soap opera for men. It's a story. You need to be able to tell the whole of the story. And when you are developing characters, you need a backstory. And I think taking away the backstory is bad.
Well, they're not going to take it away, are they? I mean, I don't think you can diminish the importance of Moto2 and Moto3, even though they're both going to be reduced to one brand categories in the near future. I mean, Moto2, of course, always has been. And it probably always will be. But, Moto3 is heading in the same direction. But then I guess the philosophy now is in the same way that you look on maybe Formula One social media channels and output, you don't probably see too much Formula 2 or Formula 3 promotion. Then maybe it's going to be the same way for MotoGP. And it's almost like sport. People like us who, have been talking about Nobuo Ueda and Yuichi Wii and Tetsuya Harada. We're going to watch Moto2 and Moto3, but then the new fans and the 15 and 16-year-olds, maybe they need to concentrate on the 22 guys who are in one class and, the bigger fuss is being made about them rather than having to sort of worry about 2 other Grand Prix races and a load of other characters.
Yeah, but I mean, like, F2 and F3 used to have, for example, separate races at separate tracks, and they weren't even at F1. It's not always been the case. Whereas a Grand Prix weekend has always had multiple classes. It's always had support classes or feeder classes. Obviously, it has changed. I mean, it's completely different. Gone are the days when Angel Nieto could win 12+1 championships, and on sort of 50s, 80s 125s. Those days are gone. Now riders move up through the categories, but again, it's about the backstory, and I do think you have to focus on it. There is talk of MotoGP going to 25 races, which no, thank you. And that then becomes a real problem for Moto2 and Moto3 because they simply don't have the budgets. I think the biggest problem for Moto2 and Moto3 is that the more you take attention away from them, the harder it becomes for them to find budget, and the harder it finds for them to become budget. The less, the less important it becomes. The less, the more difficult it is for them to be at all of the races. And it becomes a vicious circle.
Would it be that bad if Moto2 and Moto3 was essentially like a European championship with 3 to 4 signature overseas events, like, say, the opener in Thailand or Qatar, and then the US GP plus,
Phillip Island.
Phillip Island, yeah. I don't know. I mean, if you had like 3 just to help those teams survive a bit more, kind of center their budgets and their promotion even more, would that be such a bad thing or not?
I don't think it would be a massively bad thing for Moto2 and Moto3, for example. I would just think how then are they going to fill the race program for the race weekends they're not at, because it's not like Formula One where the race is 2.5 hours and takes up the majority of the afternoon. As we know, MotoGP lasts for 40 minutes, and if you take away the junior classes on a Sunday, then what have you got? 10-minute warm-up session, rider parade, and MotoGP race. I mean, it's not a great deal of action to fill up a kind of a morning and a day. So that would be a concern. Maybe they would have to, get in some support races from local series or whatever like that. But
we have it in Kota now.
I think exactly, and there was the precedent, I guess, when we used to go to Laguna Seca, that the junior classes didn't go there, but then that was part of the what is now the Moto America Championship, and American Superbikes, or the AMA as it was called back then, would have 2 races plus maybe 1 or 2 support classes there. So I think just from what you can offer your average fan, I think it certainly detracts once you start taking away the junior classes. And let's face it, more often than not, they are the races that excite more than MotoGP in its current format.
I mean, just to draw a line under the subject, Marc Marquez for me is a 9-time world champion.
Yeah.
But I fully get why he was also being painted as 7 times, because 7 is still a pretty amazing number, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's a 9-time world champion and a 7-time MotoGP champion. But I think also, let Mark celebrate whatever he wants. He's winning the championship. We've got this amazing comeback story, and here we are talking about, what number he's going to have on the stupid T-shirt during his stupid celebration to do it. So it's petty, it's pointless, and we shouldn't be talking about it. What we should be talking about is. Yeah, exactly. We've got content, mate. # content. But honestly, we should be talking about what an amazing story this comeback is. What an amazing year it's been. Just how everything that he's been through.
Yeah, we haven't mentioned that this year. We should probably go into a big great bit of detail about that right now.
Sort out the thumbnail, Neil. Just put it there, and then that's it. Job done. Well, let's talk about his brother, because some other MotoGP news surfacing this week that Alex gets a well-deserved hike in machinery for 2026.
Whether he wants it or not.
Yes, a factor of Desmi Sadiqi. Am I being unfair by saying this is a bit of a 50-50 kind of dice roll here? Because, Marquez struggled a little bit on the GP23. He wasn't the only one. I mean, Bastianini and Jorge Martin had their own endeavors with iterations of the GP Ducati machinery in the last couple of years. There must be part of Alex Marquez wondering, do I really want this in one way when I've got a motorcycle that I know back to front and serves me so well? But then also it's a big boost for Gresini, right? Because, for all their efforts and their promotion, they're all getting a little bit more elevated importance, let's say, in terms of support from the Italian factory.
Yeah, I mean, the original plan was that Fermín Aldeguer would get a factory treatment in 2026. Yes, gosh, I'm getting old, so I can't remember numbers or anything else. No, I mean, the plan was to give the bike to Aldeguer. However, Alex Marquez has been fantastic this year. He has been just so good that you cannot ignore him. The fact that he is going to be runner-up to his brother Mark, the fact that he has been basically the only rider to be anywhere near him has clearly shown that he deserves this, that he deserves equal treatment. I think Alex will be happy that he'll be on the same bike as his brother, so he gets a fairer chance. You can't put it down to the machinery. You can't say, he's got sort of half and more horsepower. He's got this part. He's got that part, or whatever. They're going to have level and equal. Also, so, for example, I was looking at the test. I went to the VR46 garage, and they've got their shocks laid out there, and the GP24 rear shocks use a steel spring, so they're painted yellow. The GP25 are using Öhlins upgraded titanium springs, which is lighter. It behaves a little bit. It behaves a little bit more differently, but obviously because they're newer, they're better. Also, they're titanium, which is better. All these small things are what riders are looking for. They always they're always looking. They want to be on the same as someone else, because then they believe it just comes down to them, and it's not down to that. So yeah, and we don't know what bikes. We don't know whether people are going to be racing GP24s next year. So the likes of Morbidelli and Aldeguer, whether they're in fact, only those two, because there'll be 4 factory bikes and two old bikes. We don't know whether they're going to be racing GP24s or GP25s. That decision hasn't been made yet. I asked and was told, we don't know yet. So that is where it gets, very, very interesting. So it might even be better to be on a GP26, whatever that might be, because at least you're not going to be on a GP25.
And I think also from Ducati's point of view, they have probably acknowledged this year that having one less current, fully up-to-date factory bike is definitely a disadvantage. Over the past or the previous 2 or 3 years, I think they had 4 full factory machines that weren't always identical, because usually you had Johan Zarco down in the Pramac box getting stuff siphoned to him to kind of act as a bit of a test mule before the factory riders then put it on their bikes. But you had 4 bikes that you could basically look at the relevant data at and sort of try and help the entire fleet move forward, so to speak. And this year, you could argue that, with Pecco Bagnaia's struggles, you're only falling back on Fabio Di Giannantonio. And, the overall performance of Ducati this year has definitely been notable in that it's been weaker than the previous 2 seasons. So I think from the factory, you're deservedly congratulating Alex Marquez on a brilliant season that he's had so far. Second in the championship, 9 podiums, 2 wins, countless sprint podiums as well. But I think for the project as a whole, and I remember last year, Pecco Bagnaia was quite outspoken on this, saying that we should have 4 full up-to-date factory machines. I think, for the project as a whole, it's also Ducati acknowledging that this is something that they need, even if it is going to cost a bit more.
If you look at the other factories, KTM have got 4 factory bikes. Yamaha have got 4 factory bikes. Aprilia have sort of
staggered. It seems a bit more staggered with Aprilia.
Yes, there's a bit more of a gap, but they are now. I think Raul Fernandez was saying basically he's now up to factory spec. What Agura's on, I'm not sure. In Honda, we've got 3 factory bikes. So yeah, I mean, to stay ahead, to keep the advantage which Ducati have, it's in their interest to have 4 factory bikes.
Well, to find out a bit more about how Gresini have approached 2025 and Alex Marquez's superb season so far, Dave, you spoke with sporting director Michele Masini. How was the chat and where did it happen?
It happened in Austria. It was very, very good. It was very interesting because, Gresini have this amazing story where, they were very, very strong in the 500s and then the early MotoGP days. They joined up with Aprilia, and then when they split, the first race on their own with Ducatis, Enea Bastianini goes and wins it, and they seem to have riders who are always performing above expectations, like Alex Marquez. In fact, they got the best out of Fabio Di Giannantonio. They got the best out of Enea Bastianini. What they're doing with Alex Marquez is really good. So I wanted to know a little bit about the history of Michele Masini, but also of Gresini, and about how they work to create this atmosphere to do it. And also, I asked, are you going to be disappointed if Alex Marquez isn't going to be champion? This is the weekend where we expect Alex Marquez to end up as second in the championship. And I thought that Michele Massini's answer to that was very, very interesting.
Well, let's hear what Michele had to say, and when we come back, we'll quickly delve into our Japanese GP favourite memories and our predictions for the coming weekend at Motegi.
Welcome to the Paddock Pass podcast, Michele Masini, Gresini team manager. Is that your? Yep. Okay. First of all, well, I mean, we're going to talk about the incredible success that Gresini has had. But first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you end up as team manager?
Yeah, it started all in the 2008 when Fausto with Honda Italia take the technical side of the NSF 100 project with the youngest kid from 9 to 12 years old, and I start with the guy that currently are in the MotoGP paddock and the Superbike paddock, like Di Gianantonio, Bastianini, Locatelli, Fenati, and a lot of very talented guy that also come here and currently riding also in the MotoGP. I was made 2 years with this trophy. Then when Fausto in 2009 signed with Marco Simoncelli, that at the time I went to school with him.
Okay.
Yeah, we have just one year of difference of age, and I swap and go in the MotoGP garage with him, the spare parts coordinator of his bike, factory bike with Honda, with Melandri 2010 and also Hiroshi Aoyama in 2011 beside Marco. And from there I remain in MotoGP until 2014. Then I swap, I become a team coordinator for Moto2, Moto3 teams. We won a title with Jorge Martin too. Then from 2016 I come back again in MotoGP like team coordinator and continue our story with Aprilia Racing Team Gresini. That at the time it was 7 years, difficult years, but always growing the Aprilia project, sharing with the Gresini team. And the story, our bad story, that after Fausto passed away, Nadia take the lead of the team with a lot of courage and trust in the people that still are inside the team, like me, and he asked me to become the sporting director as a team manager, and I didn't think about 1 second. I say yes, we have to carry on our great history, and I think that as you know, coming in the first races of 2022, winning the races was a very emotional ones, and could be more proud of the way we still carry on this project, these dreams, because we're talking about dreams also here in Gresini Racing, and I'm really proud then to become a sporting director, such a big role, and I have a lot of trust in Nadia, and I think that the result speak very well for us.
Exactly, because it really feels like because Fausto's death must have been a very difficult moment, but you really continued in his spirit. It really feels like his spirit continues through the team.
Yeah, it's like this. It's because Gresini Racing was born in 1997, and I think that Fausto leave a strong legacy also in the paddock. Was such a nice guy, fast rider, a really clever team manager, because he was in every side of the company, in the marketing side, sporting side. He was everywhere. He know everything of our team, and so carry on a project like that without him was really not a jump in in the darkness. But in the period when Fausto was in the hospital, the 2.5 months, we grow up together. We create a stronger
Bond.
partnership. Yeah, more than before.
Yeah.
And Nadia, me, Carlo Merlinis too, we take a part of Fausto things, daily things, and so I think that we grow up really, really big to think about the future and start to build the independent team project that was the dream of Fausto.
Yeah, and it's been extremely successful, and you see that with the team, with the way that the team has achieved its success. When I go down to the garage, you see everyone. You know, garages can be messy places, they can be neat places, but you can really see the team spirit in the way that everyone works with one another. And the Gresini garage always looks like everyone knows. Everyone is talking, everyone knows what they've got to do, and they all work together. And that is one of the most interesting things to me, is the way that Gresini has managed to create this team spirit with the riders, because to get the best out of the riders, you have to create the environment in which they can perform.
Yeah.
How do you do that? How I know it's all of you, but how?
I can tell you it's our secret. No, no, but I have to say that I think that we have a group of really professional and guys, technicians, but on top of that, we need as you know, to make the result, we need the best possible package, technical, and we choose Ducati was the right choose, because we know already in 2021 that was the top project on the grid at the moment, and also that we know that the human side is more important, because in the independent team you have to make the difference with the psychological side also of the riders, of the guys that work for you every day for more than 250 days per year, and you have to create, like you said, an environment where you have to find in the shortest way possible the best version of the people.
Yeah.
Including also the rider, because at the end the rider is your investment, and you have to concentrate all on him. And I think that this made a difference. We are a team that we feel the hungry for the results. We need a rider like Alex Marquez, because we believe in him 100% from day zero, because he came back from another reality like LCR Honda, where we know that at the time we struggled with the result, but he came to us and really matched our necessity to make the result on top of that, because you know that we don't have the economy capacity of a factory team in regards of salary or other things, number of engineers inside the garage, but I think that we have everything to make a good result, to arrive to the success, and this happened. And I think that Alex Marquez now is the really profile, the really identity of the Gresini rider, because it's really like our spirit of live the racing.
Exactly, because he was, I mean, both Alex and Marc are the same in the way that they are very good at building a team around them. They want that family atmosphere. They need the emotional support of the people around them, and they're good at creating that with the people around them as well. So, like, both of them seem to be a very good fit for the Gresini team.
Yeah, I think that also the fact that we had in the same team the two brothers was an historical things. Also from the way also Marc wanted to come back to smile riding. This is we cannot be more proud of that, because we gave also him what he needs at the time, and I think that also Gresini Racing in these years show to the world after made the serious things like practice, racing, working. Another things to live racing when we finish to make also some cool things, some parties, some funny things, just to also try to cut the pressure from the rider. This is the key, because at the end we follow a dream. We don't ask to our rider to win races, but we are here for that. They know, but we cannot talk about that, because if you step in a factory team, you have to win. It's a target. In our team, it's a dream. It's different, but it's different way to reach the same results.
Because you see, there are some riders. I mean, I think Enea is a good example. He, in the factory team, you could see he had a lot more pressure on him. But within Gresini, he was such. He could ride free. He could ride, without the pressure, and every result was a good result as long as he gave his best.
Yeah, I think also the year with Enea was unbelievable, because I think when we start to build up a crew around him in 2021, we just mix a lot of already with people with Ducati experience coming from other teams, because we build up the MotoGP teams almost from zero, and then we had some guys coming from the Moto3 crew that Enea at the time with us, because Enea make his debut in the World Championship with us. We know him from the pocket bike, and we immediately create an incredible atmosphere from the rider. In fact, also the winter test went in a really extraordinary way, and when the rider have everything and made the things easily, let me say, you feel something different inside the garage, and the atmosphere in 2022 was pretty magical. Yeah,
exactly. Last question, because I know you have to go and do the track walk. Alex Marquez, I mean, the story of Marc is known, and it's interesting that he always mentions how important his year with Gresini was for him to be where he is now. But Alex has made such a big step this year. We saw flashes when he was in his first year with Honda, and then sort of his first year with you. But this year, he seems to have made such an enormous step. Where has that come from?
It comes from the difficulties we had most of all in 2024 at the beginning, because we struggle some character of the bike at the time, but difficult to extract the maximum from the bike with the Alex riding style. And I have to say that also the difficulty coming also from his teammate, his brother, because it's I think it's normal that you are under pressure with Marc Marquez inside the garage, but I think that the brother is the best profile that can extract the maximum from this pressure from the brother. I mean, and as you can know, from the last couple of races of 2024, we start to increase our speed with Alex again. And then when we swap with the GP24 in the Barcelona test, we already match a very great feeling with the bike. And I think maybe Alex also swap a lot of his mind during the winter break, work on himself, on believing in himself too, because he grew up a lot during these 3 years on this. And I was really impressed at the beginning of the season of the constance of his result, because he showed a lot of potential during the winter test. And at the end of the test, I say to him, now becoming the races, you have to do nothing. You have to continue like that, enjoy riding, because you still enjoy riding. You have to to do nothing, to coming prepared to the races.
Yeah.
And was like this. Really proud of what we are achieving until now, and hope to start to continue the second half of the season this way.
It looked like this year was maybe the best chance for Alex to win a championship.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there was his brother again.
Yeah.
Will you be disappointed if he doesn't win the championship, or will you just be happy about the incredible performance that he's shown this year?
So we have to be honest that will be really difficult gain a lot of points to Marc, because it's difficult to beat for everyone at the moment. But still, the first rider, the first team behind him, make us really proud, and I will be if the championship will be finished tomorrow, I will be so proud of Alex, because I become really angry because Alex is an underrated rider for the world, and he's not anymore the brother of and he's Alex Marquez. He's two-time world champion. He's winning MotoGP races, and still made a really great championship.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We're back. Neil, what was your kind of standout Japanese GP memory?
Oh, well, I would say you're putting me on the spot, but you're not really, because you asked me to come up with this prior to the podcast. I mean, there's a rich tapestry to choose from, Ad, because we're talking about the Japanese Grand Prix. We're not just talking about racing at Motegi, and we all know that Motegi is quite a disappointing track, and a disappointing track for racing. You just have to look at last year's MotoGP races there and understand just how completely lifeless and dull they were, and void of drama. But prior to Motegi,
It's got a tunnel, Neil.
We used to go to Suzuka. And although Suzuka is obviously very, very dangerous and not fit for current MotoGP machines, unfortunately, it is also a fantastic layout and had some of the greatest, 500cc racing back in the day. So if I had to choose one from then, I would probably plump for the 1993 500cc race, which was won by Wayne Rainey. I think he called it his favorite race ever, his best ever win, when he was up against Kevin Schwantz and then two Hondas, Daryl Beattie and Shinichi Ito. And it was just one of those races where the four of them were going at it all race long. Rainey, I think, was the only rider of the four on Dunlops, and he said he was just like laughing in his helmet because he was almost trying to intimidate his rivals by the fact that he could just spin up his rear tire coming onto the back straight, knowing that the guys on Michelin's just didn't have that. They didn't have that benefit. They obviously had grippier rear tires and couldn't rear wheel steer as much as he could. And I think he also said it was one of those races where he had a proper out of body experience, where he was so in the zone and so concentrated that he almost remembers the race as a kind of like spirit looking down on himself outside of his body. And it was something I don't think that he had ever experienced before. And yeah, just had this amazing last lap where I think he just got the edge on Schwantz. Schwantz was pushed back to fourth, then had to kind of try and recover ground. Eventually made it back up to second, but didn't quite do it. And really won it. So yeah, that was, there's so many great Suzuka races to choose from, but I think that was the one that still stands out.
Yeah, for me, 88 and 89, seeing Kevin Schwantz on that Pepsi Suzuki, it was kind of like a phase, I don't know, of life as well, where you wanted to stay up in the middle of the night or early in the morning to see, these races going on, and to see those two Americans battling at the front, no quarter sort of spared. It was pretty sort of, I don't know, memorable, I have to say. Also as well, working in the 2001 Japanese GP at Suzuka, I remember being extremely puzzled that I had to walk through a theme park to get to the circuit itself. And then there was also a feeling around Valentino Rossi at the time, I think similar to when Marc Marquez came into the Premier class, where you thought, wow, this is something special and he's really going to tear things up. Of course, the race itself was also unforgettable for the altercation with Max Biaggi. We've talked about it on other podcasts. But I also want to give a nod to 1992 because it was an incredibly rain-hit race. I was following Wayne Gardner, who was sort of like my sort of racing hero as a kid, and Gardner had a nightmare that day, fell off in the rain, but then charged all the way back to sort of the top 5, I think it was, before falling off again and breaking his leg for the second time, I think, in 3 years. I just remember being devastated watching that, thinking, no way, this was going to be his sort of title year. And it actually turned out being a good season for Gardner once he got fit again and managed to actually tame the NSR 500 on the Rothmans Honda. I looked it up earlier. The Big Bang, that's right. I looked up earlier, and it was, I think Mick Doohan won the Grand Prix in 1992. It was just ahead of Doug Chandler and Kevin Schwantz, the 2 Americans on the podium. And I was thinking, how many podium finishes did Doug Chandler get? I was actually wondering whether that sort of result of Suzuka may have been one of the only ones. And then I looked it up, and he actually had 6. I don't sort of have much memory recall of that. I know he rode sort of the factory Suzuki for at least a season. But it was like one of those sort of random American names that popped up, and you think, what a sort of rich period that was, the end of the 80s and the 90s for American road racing. It's just a shame now. Actually, I saw a photo the other day on social media of Gardner talking to Wayne Rainey on the podium, and I thought, what if these guys now had to do the MotoGP thing of going into the little room behind the podium, and you could hear their comments or their candid views on the race. It's just, to have that language, that first language being English, and to hear those American and Australian voices, it'd be something very sort of odd for MotoGP in this current era. So it was just like a good flashback time. Anyway, I've talked enough, Dave. What was your sort of Japanese GP memory?
I'll be honest, I don't really have a Japanese GP memory. I can't remember, a lot of those 500 races. I think, Suzuki was clearly a much, much better track than Motegi. Motegi, I think, has blanked out most of the MotoGP memories because the racing there is generally not terrific. And unlike you, Ad, I'm never very keen on getting up early in the morning. Even 30 or 40 years ago, I was not keen on getting up early in the morning. So, I missed a lot of it. I do remember... I do remember watching Jack Miller on Moto3 in, I think, 2013 on the FTR Honda, where he was completely outpowered by the KTMs and was doing absolutely everything on the brakes to be able to stay with them. And just thinking, this boy is quite good. Just the way that he was having to ride to be able to keep up with the KTMs, because in that period, a little bit like now, but even more so. The KTM had a lot of horsepower, but was quite strong on the brakes, but didn't have any turning. The Honda frame was sort of useless. The FTR frame was fantastic. The engine was underpowered, and so you could keep up if you really sort of took a lot of risks and pushed really hard and really used the strength of it. So. I really, really enjoyed that, and I'll be honest. Because I'm a pervert, I did enjoy, what is it, the 23 race, the one which is absolutely soaking and was cancelled due to rain. I like that sort of that sort of drama, and I would bring up. Yeah, exactly. I would bring up 2015, remembering seeing Valentino Rossi in Motegi after the race, after getting a podium. A really incredibly strong ride for him, but he looked so drained, so completely destroyed that you thought, okay, this year is taking a lot out of it.
Moving on to the last phase of the podcast then, a quick mention first for pole position travel. Neil, as we mentioned on one of the last shows, the Valencia GP sold out. Good luck trying to get tickets for that. You're going to need to be a paddock guest, or maybe try to sneak in the fence somewhere. I'm not encouraging that behavior whatsoever, but that might be one of the only ways to see Grand Prix motorcycles around the Ricardo Tormos circuits. For the first time in 2 years, of course, we didn't go in 2024, but pole position travel have some packages left. We can stay in a very classy hotel downtown in the city centre, and then get accommodation and transport and shuttles, as well as some entertainment around the Grand Prix itself, all sorted out by those folks at Pole Position Travel. So have a look at the website at polepositiontravel.com and get your travel and packages sorted for Valencia. Predictions. Considering that we're at the hardest braking track on the calendar, as I mentioned earlier, it's likely to rain and be quite slick, and the fact that he's the most successful rider at Motegi with 5 wins, Marc Marquez, guys. Is there anyone else that could perhaps hold some sort of candle to this guy?
Probably not. Difficult to really see anyone doing that. I mean, he looked so in control in a race, I guess you could say, or a track that is kind of comparable to Motegi, which is Spielberg in Austria. I mean, Marco Bezzecchi, I guess, did give him a good, decent run. Fermin Aldeguer pushed him close in the closing laps. So maybe there is some hope, but and maybe the fact that every single interview he's going to do this weekend will be about, are you going to wrap up the championship? How do you feel about the championship? I think he did mention this at the test at Misano last week, where he said it's going to be a really difficult press conference on Thursday because it's just going to be a barrage of what is your approach going to be this weekend? How are you going to win the championship? And so on. So, perhaps that could be somewhat of a distraction, but I do think that Mark is professional enough to be able to deal with that. I think he's won 3 of his MotoGP championships in Japan before. So he does have form for this. And as you mentioned previously, Ad, probably the rider I'm most interested to see this weekend is Pedro Acosta, because it was arguably his most promising race weekend of 2024 in his rookie season. I think he became the 3rd youngest MotoGP pole sitter in history, and should have won the sprint race before crashing out, and was in the mix on Sunday before crashing out. And really, from the moment he crashed out on lap 2 or lap 3, it was pretty much good night and curtains as a contest. So hopefully, I'm really hopeful that Pedro and maybe Bezzecchi can bring some fun to this one.
Any names for you, Dave?
Well, yeah, apart from Marc Marquez, yeah, obviously. I think that it's a very good point that really is going to come down to, Marc's approach, Marc's attitude. It is going to be a huge amount of pressure because, again, here we are talking about it. All he needs to do is finish the championship or finish the weekend with 3 more points than Alex. I think he's smart enough because he is dedicated. I mean, he spent the last 2 years trying to do this. So he really is focused just on one thing, and that's wrapping up the title. And that means outscoring Alex by 3 points. If Pedro Acosta gets away, if Marco Bezzecchi gets away, he probably is not going to care as long as Alex is behind him. And Alex has a fairly... Yeah, he has a fairly poor record at Motegi in MotoGP. I mean, obviously, he caused a bit of a stupid crash last year. So yeah, but I think you would naturally say it's going to be Marc. However, the championship is more important. So I do think that, Pedro Acosta, I am very looking forward to seeing what Pedro Acosta can do. Yeah, Marco Bezzecchi is just getting better. Jorge Martin has had another test. They've worked on the ergonomics. They've found more of it. It's going to be interesting to see what Pecco Bagnaia can do, just because, have we really made another step forward or not? But no, I think the 3 runners are going to be watching are going to be Acosta, let's see, Acosta, Bezzecchi, and Jorge Martin, because I think they're going to be the most interesting.
Neil, just a quick question for you. I mean, I've been to Suzuka, I've been to Sugo. I haven't been to Motegi. I mean, you went there, I think it was your first time in 2024. What was it like as an experience going into the track? I mean, if we had to, would you recommend it to any kind of European-based fans or fans from other parts of the world that would consider going to the Japanese GP? Or how would you sort of summarize the overall experience?
Different, definitely very different. I would say if your budget is unlimited, I would say Japan is a good one. And also, if you're okay with not staying super close to the track, I think it's quite difficult to get accommodation around the Mobility Resort Motegi. And you have to stay a little bit further away, maybe 50 minutes drive away. And it's obviously Japan isn't the cheapest place, although I think it is a lot cheaper for Europeans now than it was, let's say, 10 years ago, just because of the performance of the yen. But I mean, I loved it just because it was so different to the rest of the races that you go to. It's not a sort of volcanic stadium atmosphere. It's quite polite and unassuming. And yeah, it's definitely something quite different. It's not the most amazing track, but it is a cool facility. And you also have the chance to go to the the Honda Museum, which is part of the track as well, which has the most spectacular array of old Honda machinery, which for kind of perverts like myself is just an absolutely unmissable experience. So that was definitely one of the highlights of the entire trip, just getting to go in there and look at all these old 500s that are sitting on display. Yeah, that was great.
Literally, the main reason for me going to Motegi, if I ever do go to Motegi, which I hope I will do one year, is just to go to the Honda Hall and then maybe not bother with the race.
All right, well, listen, that's enough pervy behaviour on this podcast. We'll be back for our Paddock Note show on Thursday after we've heard a few press conferences and debriefs, and to preview a little bit more of the action this weekend. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and we'll be back soon.